it's much simpler to build a business. It is a long and hard journey building an ecosystem, not always as gratifying, not always resulting in quick successes. So long and hard journey. I think in a company you have employees, in an ecosystem you have followers, in a company, and of course the purpose of any company is anyway not to make money, but it is one important output of setting up a company is you make money. With an ecosystem you build influence, you create impact. Companies often think short term, often think quarter on quarter. Ecosystems think long term, decade on decade. We were looking, me and a couple of partners, one of my companies supporting startups with finding investment and so on, and we were looking at a company which looks just absolutely fantastic, right? And we just couldn't, I mean, the idea is great, the business model is great, the action that they're taking is great, everything seems good, but somehow at the back of our minds, all three of us, there's three partners in that firm, we're looking at it and something's not right. Yeah, something's not clicking. And I think we came to the conclusion.
Hey everyone, welcome to yet another new episode. This time we have all the way from Dubai, but still in Dubai. We are virtually doing this. We have Varun with us today, as well as, of course, my co-host Adrian here. Today hopefully it's going to be a nice episode. As I mentioned, we have Varun. Varun is the founder of Konsälidön, an ecosystem platform that backs high energy entrepreneurs and help their ventures scale into global movement, not just companies. So he's not only an advisor or an investor, more of a builder of environment, designing ecosystems that enable founders to move fast without burning out, creating communities like the future is longer, also collaborating on go-to-market strategies for global tech entering the UAE, which is an interesting topic actually also, as right now the UAE is positioning itself, especially within the new realm of technology and more so AI, as the center and putting more effort and funds towards being one of the leaders globally on that. We will explore today some of the philosophies of Varun, like blending long arc thinking, personal and team alignment, infrastructure level disruption. Yeah, just believe market fit. That's also a good term, and explore how or what's the kind of formula, if there is, for these kind of ecosystems to be built on. But yeah, thank you Varun for being here today.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Yasser, and thank you, Adrian, for having me today. I'm really looking forward to this.
Perfect. And as we discussed also before this, we would have loved actually, and maybe also in the future to have this in person, because I believe also you have podcasting as also part of also your media and also a lot of the influence in the posts, also this thought leadership that you do online.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be so nice to have it here in Dubai in person or wherever you are. And yeah, I look forward to that as well.
But maybe speaking of the podcast, what's the kind of topics you like exploring? Maybe on your when it's something you organizing from yourself.
Yeah. I don't necessarily organize a regular podcast, but
Okay.
lots and lots of web events. A lot of my web events are live events, essentially, are centered around longevity. So that's a topic that I love talking about, specifically longevity biotech. We do a lot of business related topics as well. We like to think exponentially, and we do workshops and webinars on that topic. How to grow an exponential business, how to build a movement, how to start, your building your ecosystem. So I like to cover these topics usually.
Yeah, and that's also very important. I think that's maybe definitely a good starting point, which is not starting a business, but an ecosystem or a movement, as you said it. But what's the key distinction here? Maybe because I see this is part of also your core values or your core thoughts. What's the distinction between someone building a business and someone building an ecosystem, both in terms of his input as well as the output?
Sure. I think it's much simpler to build a business. It is a long and hard journey building an ecosystem, not always as gratifying, not always resulting in quick successes. So long and hard journey. I think in a company you have employees, In an ecosystem, you have followers. In a company, and of course, the purpose of any company is anyway not to make money, but it is one important output of setting up a company is you make money. With an ecosystem, you build influence, you create impact. Companies often think short term, often think quarter on quarter. Ecosystems think long term, decade on decade. I think there are a lot of fundamental differences, and also in terms of how you approach spreading your idea through a company. An idea can be spread through a company, right? And some companies do it really, really well, and other companies don't do it that well. Similarly, ecosystems, some people build a great ecosystem that goes and has global impact, and some others die out in a few years as well.
And in terms of ecosystems, maybe what could be an example that you would point out as something you admire, or you would say, okay, that's a good example of an ecosystem, how it should be?
I think the best well known example is TED. I'm deeply, deeply inspired by TED. I watched I think more than 300 TED Talks over the years. We're also doing, at some point I used to watch 10, 12 a day, right?
Yeah.
And I wish I had that much time now. I'd love to keep watching TED Talks every day, 10, 12, so many those perspectives, right? But I think besides the insights from their talks, TED has built a great ecosystem for itself around the world. It's not just that one conference that they do in the US, and now they have a couple of other conferences. But I think the first thing that they did was just share their ideas so openly, so abundantly on their website, right? Instead of trying to keep it, $5,000, attend a conference, which most conferences at that time did. Here's our talk. They're available online. Ideas are worth spreading. Everybody listen to them, right? Everybody get inspired, everybody get influenced. So much more impactful. And then they've built an ecosystem around themselves, right? Of course, their TED speakers are a huge ecosystem in itself because of just the sheer amount of talks that they've done over the years, but also, the TEDx, when they opened the TEDx community, every city in the world has several TEDx events every year. And I'm co-organizing TEDx Palm Jumeirah next year. Really, really looking forward to that.
That's amazing.
And after years and years of following, so anyhow, TED, is probably the best and most recognized examples of how to create an ecosystem. But there's several other organizations that create ecosystems, right, as well.
Yeah, but already you can see some pattern. I think that's why giving an example help already understand some patterns of what differentiates and what makes ecosystems unique. So as far as I can tell, or I can see already, so one, as you mentioned, is communicating the vision broadly. So building a brand, not just a logo or a company, but on top of that also is doing things differently, because as you said, by the time when TED was sharing all of these values for free all over social media, that was not like a common thing that these conferences would do. So is there any other more patterns or like more identifications?
Yeah. Several other identifications, like I said, an ecosystem will gain followers, right? It'll gain followers so quickly. Obviously, it takes time, right? Anything good takes time, but, it gains, it creates a lot more impact as well, right? Companies are more profit driven, right? More revenue driven. Ecosystems are impact driven. So if you look at any ecosystem in the world, right? Even if you look at, for example, the free zones in the UAE, if you're familiar with them, right? A lot of them focus on just being businesses, right? So all they care about is you come to the UAE, you get a license, you get your visa, you get your office, you rent your office, and you're on, right? But the most successful free zones in the UAE are not just companies, they're entire ecosystems, right? So what they do is they set up an anchor tenant, and all the suppliers of that anchor tenant and all the customers of that anchor tenant want to be in that place, right? So what you've done is you've created, for example, a healthcare ecosystem or a logistics ecosystem, and then you create a lot more impact, right? That makes sense. And you could be both profit driven and impact driven at the same time, right? It's making money is not a bad thing.
Yes.
It's just not the only goal or the end goal of an ecosystem.
Yeah. Maybe like also extending this to Adrian. I'm wondering when already I think Varun and we already had examples, and I understand a little bit what it means an ecosystem for you, but maybe both taking this into consideration and also maybe without Adrian, what the first thing would come to your mind when thinking ecosystem versus company? Would that be the same actually, or would that be something different for you?
That's why I was so silent actually, because I just I fully understand, fully agree. I've been myself involved in basically having to build an ecosystem, a small scale, but I totally can relate basically to the hardship of that. And also, in just example, in my case, I was just living on the countryside, no internet, so you have to bring internet where no profit is there. So you need to basically convince people and to basically end up with an ecosystem, the same thing, right? So make an understanding why digitalization is important, and then generate somehow the funding and activate people. And it was good, and it was a lot of learning, well, how people are. So it has also some hard sides to take. But I also, so as I said, I can, on one side, I do understand and totally agree on. I like actually the clearness how you put it. And I even was at the beginning, I was kind of wondering, okay, how does this fit together, like longevity? And then we switched to ecosystem. And when you said like companies things in quarter to quarter or year to year, right? From an ecosystem mindset, you have to think in 10 years. Like, I mean, the UN Charter is also something like that, right? And then you need more than one lifetime to see the impact
Yeah, but you don't need
arise.
more than one lifetime, because see, and here's how I follow trends, right? So one trend that I believe is coming is longevity biotech. There's a lot happening in the space of living longer, right? And there's lots of amazing startups, and there's the Healthspan X Prize, and there's just so many funds. The Evolution Fund in Saudi, for example, that are funding longevity startups to help us live, longevity biotech startups that can help us live for longer, right? Now, when we live for longer, okay, and then there's also, quantum computing. At some point, it started, of course, with Gen AI, and then with agentic AI, and very soon we're going to have AGI. And from the narrow spectrum of what AI can do, AGI will be able to do almost everything better than a human can do. And I think it's going to be maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks or maybe even a few days, who knows, right? From the time when we go from AGI to ASI, artificial super intelligence, right? And, the world is changing at a pace that we've never ever seen before, right? And then we're going to have quantum computing. Many countries across the world are working on building quantum computers, supercomputers, and so on. Now, when we get quantum computing, and when we get a better understanding of how systems work, the natural world works around us, how our body works, right? We're all going to live to 150 healthy, right? Without aging. So we're going to stop aging. So, and when that happens, do you think we're going to regret that we built a company for 5 years? Of course, right? We'd want to have, if when we go back, when we go to that future and we look backwards, we'll say, I wish I'd built my company to last for 50 years. I wish I'd built my company to last for generations, right? Because I'm still alive. And that company that I'd created in 2020 lasted me only 15 years, 20 years, right? I wish it still lasted, right? So I don't want to be in the year 2100, and I'm pretty sure I'll be alive in 2100. Maybe I'll be 120 years old then. I know that I'd want to have built a company that lasted, or a company or an ecosystem that lasted 50 years, 80 years, or for generations. You see what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting take, and I think that's
Very
also
interesting.
because we, honestly speaking, like for me, and I think that's deviating a little bit, but it goes hand to hand. So longevity, because the way we put ourselves in perspective to our life and how much time we have of it, is like influencing heavily our decisions, right? As a founders, as humans, etc. So longevity for me personally, I still cannot get my head around it. I still think that's it's almost these kind of AGI, it's the kind of thing that definitely on the horizon, but it's difficult to predict how fast and how good is it going to be. But I'm not sure. Yeah, Adrian, you want to say something?
Yeah, so since obviously, Varun, you've spent a lot of time of wrapping your mind around this perspective, and I have something. Maybe you can basically tell me how this match or what this means. It goes in direction of the the question like, will we get to AGI or super intelligence? And what I'm looking when since we are talking about longevity, so you have also a lot of background in biotechnology and biology itself. And now I'm looking on the world as a biological system, right? And if I'm imagining basically the first of all the millions of years where like biological entities replicate, recombine, evolve, and massive parallel. So you go from high level animals, right, till down to the bacteria. And this is something that I always basically try to make people aware when they say they are afraid about AI killing us, basically saying, imagine how many recombinations happen basically per second in the world. And each of this combination, right? So each born human, if you take it on that level, but honestly, you go down to the virus, you go down, the viruses are nothing bad. They're just something there, right? And you go down to microorganism, right? Each recombination can be the one exploding ASI thing out there. And this happens in millions of years. And here we are. We're not dying every second. So and then back like I'm trying to find what is the difference between this system of generating basically intelligent entities, right? With a certain type of intelligence. There are many types of intelligence, and at the end, it's about surviving the volatility of the world, right? Are you still there tomorrow? Then that's more or less what life is, right? So, and that's making me like think, okay, what is so different with us and with the AI approach that we're doing that will surpass all of this millions of years and per second highly parallel happening recombinations there? Did you have a discussion maybe in that direction? Do you have some insights on that?
Yeah. I think what's different is that never in this time has been maybe a more intelligent species than human and what we are than humans. And, we're creating something which is potentially more intelligent than humans, right? And so at some point, but I agree that, the human species hasn't ever died in, or been wiped out in the millions of years of evolution. And but we're definitely not the end. We're definitely not the last dominant species on earth or in the universe, right? Because what about dinosaurs, right? At some point they were the most dominant species, and I'm sure when three dinos were doing a podcast like that, and I'm just joking, but I'm sure they said the same thing: we're never going to die, right? So there is reason to be scared, I think. But having said that, we're also probably intelligent enough to control it and to use it in the right way. So, for example, we have already started creating bodies for AGI and for ASI, right? So, AGI and ASI are not going to rest in servers somewhere because the world is built for us humans. And if AGI and ASI just rest on a server somewhere, they're going to use us as their way to navigate the world, right? The physical world, which is why humans were intelligent enough. We're building humanoids to give AI and AGI a body, right? And then humanoids are going to support us, hopefully, and AI to navigate this world, if that makes sense, and explore it deeper and explore other planets deeper. But sort of coming back to ecosystems before Yasser has to pull us back, I think this is something that the one of the most important reasons why I think entrepreneurs with good ideas should focus on building ecosystems rather than just plain old companies is because the world is changing beyond belief. And when humanoids enter the workforce, right, and when us as humans are living for longer, imagine this scenario, right? We're living till 150, we're super healthy, there's AI that makes everything much easier, and there's humanoids doing so much of the work. What's going to happen, right? What are we going to do with our time, right? So we need to start building ecosystems around our passions, around our beliefs, around our ideals, so that we can grow them and use the extra time to do something meaningful, right? Rather than just, unfortunately, all of us have grown up in such a scarce environment, right? In a scarcity driven world, that we've had to create companies to make money, right? We had no choice. This was something that we had to do, and this was the right I mean, who knows what was right, what was wrong, but this was the natural evolution. Companies were the natural evolution for small businesses, right? Corporates and enterprises. But ecosystems are just the next evolution. And as you know, like nothing can stop evolution, right? Just as so, sorry, let's bring it back to you, Yasser, with ecosystems rather
But
than
that's you. I think we did a good circle because we explored multiple area, like multiple aspects of it, of looking into it. And ultimately, also, if I were to boil it down, not to very much strip level of, like, let's say, first principle thinking or whatever, but as close as possible, I would say ecosystem versus companies. Companies are there to solve an external problem. So it's basically from an external end. You look at the external and you solve an end, as opposed to ecosystem, you build something unique to you, how you think your vision of that world should be, and it's from internal out.
So it's also something that I kept back because what we can see basically companies are also moving. It's not now, so many companies even earlier, yeah, you start with a product, but then you understand I need basically to sell my product. I need a market. To have a market, actually, you sometimes invent your market and then you sell your product, right? So you develop your, yes, so you said it, not a logo, but
Brand.
a brand. Thank you. I had it to German in my head now. And we also see that they move from the strict, like Varun, you said, like a company has employees. Many companies are switching to not being a company because they see that it's limiting you if you try to rule everybody, and they try rather to become a community, basically an ecosystem at the end, self-driven, intrinsic. So they're searching for this kind of way. So I think this more or less is confirming. If I would take like that, is confirming basically what you're saying. So companies were yesterday, now we see that building ecosystems is a next level of being successful and generating impact. Impact generates money at the end because it's value that you're actually generating. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing, Yasser, on your point, right? I don't completely see it like that, right? I don't think ecosystems are about taking your idea and spreading it across the world, right? I think, and it's not outside in or inside out. I think both companies have to also be inside out and outside in, right? So you need to see what problem you're solving in the world, where you're being useful, right? And then you need to see you need to be good at it. So it has to be both, and it has to align with your values and your ideas. I think it's the same with ecosystems, right? I mean, but I think that an ecosystem is more about taking your idea, finding other people who believe also in that idea, and maybe going and finding other people who want to solve the problem with that same idea, right? And want to add value in the same way as you. And instead of seeing them as competitors, right, which was the traditional approach, seeing them as collaborators and finding a structure and a way in which you can both amplify the impact that you can make. So, if you see what I mean, but I think in both cases, you need to create something that is useful to the world, right? You need to create something that has value for you. So, it has to be both inside out and outside in.
Just one question, because I saw that you're connecting an idea to a problem. And I was wondering, is an ecosystem something that is around an idea to a problem, or it's around a problem and organizing, activating people, finding going for the best ideas? If you narrow it down to everybody who has a similar idea for a problem, you can do that. So that's a question. You can do both. And I would have assumed that basically the ecosystem is activating people to solve. Yeah, okay. It's my opinion. It's about the
Yeah.
problem. It's a
No, no,
question.
absolutely. The thing is, both are two sides of the same coin, isn't it?
Mm,
So why did we invent the wheel, right? It was a great idea, probably one of the best ideas in the world, right, when it comes to transport and locomotion. But why did we come up with that idea? Because we had a problem. Things were difficult to move, right,
yeah,
from one
yeah.
point to another, and we needed something which could move things from one to another. That's how we came up with the idea. So ideas always originate when, well, not always, but often originate when the beholder of the idea sort of sees a problem, right? So both are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, but actually, if I'm thinking about container logistics, right? The container was also an idea to a problem. Everybody had the problem. the ecosystem was okay. Everybody in logistic was the ecosystem, but actually, as soon as an idea came, by everybody adopting that idea, because it is not fully efficient in all terms, but it turned out at the end that it was the right idea. And okay, now I'm just gave me the answer that yes, it is the idea plus a problem where the ecosystem is arising. Yeah, okay.
I mean, you can set up ecosystems not just for commercial purposes, right? You can set up ecosystems for your passion, um, something to for a cause, right? So there could be many reasons to set up an ecosystem. I think this is something I tell young entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who come to me for, or first time entrepreneurs who come to me for advice, is that either go find an ecosystem where you're heard and you can create value and your value is enhanced, and if you can't find an ecosystem, you need to go build it. So this is in my view. I don't think entrepreneurs, just like entrepreneurs will not be able to survive without AI in the future, I don't think we'll be able to uh, survive without a community or an ecosystem around us. There's so many, everyone is going to be an entrepreneur in the future, right? It's so easy now to set up a business, to set up a company. Everybody has ideas. There's nobody who does not have ideas, right? Everybody sees problems, has ideas, and a lot of people are going to do it. And then the ones that are going to be successful are the ones that either join an ecosystem or create it, because everyone can't be creating an ecosystem. That would be a disaster as well, right?
Yeah, you cannot stop everyone trying to do that, but of course they will basically get together. Yeah, and still I see that for ecosystem, I mean it applies to companies as well. You need basically a lot of leadership skills. I think that's and a lot of actually experience, like maturity, to be successful in that. Else it's very easy basically to, if you don't have experience, so starting very young and you don't have this intrinsic leadership skill in you. So some people are more talented on that than others, right? All those soft skills that helps you interact, connect, and then it will be hard basically to build an ecosystem. So I think it's not everybody the right person to start it, to build it, to run it, and they will not be happy. It's gonna kill a lot of your time if you're not the right person to that. Yeah.
And if an ecosystem exists, right, why would you go about creating another ecosystem? If it exists, go join it, right? Go figure out a way to be important and useful to that ecosystem, right?
Yeah. And maybe a question then in terms of now that we understand actually in a good manner based on this conversation what an ecosystem is, what's some of the benefits of it. But we touched briefly on one important factor, which is founders, especially first-time founders and first-time builders and entrepreneurs. Now that the barriers is very low, especially for technology-based, honestly for all kind of, because technology enables also many other aspects and many other sectors to be easier. I would say
If you're building hardware, that's not so low the barrier for technology.
true, true, but I would still
Software.
argue that with AI, with a lot of research based, a lot of like sort of problem solving, it's still getting faster to certain levels, and we see it already to a certain degree. For example, like to get into the car manufacturing industry was for a long period like very hard. Like we had no new, like many newcomers, but now there is many all around the world. Not saying that it's anyone can start like a car manufacturing factory, but it's still a sign that it's not like the barrier is not so high. But still, for the first time builders, what do you think, Varun, is the thing that makes a difference? So the idea is just the beginning, right? So there is multiple things towards the end to reach the end, especially when building an ecosystem where it's a long term game.
Yeah. Just on, but I will answer that quickly. But Adrian, it is easier to build hardware to some extent, right? With 3D printing, you can prototype much faster. There's a company, and maybe there are more by now, but there's a company that is building rockets using 3D printing, and not just rockets, but when they go to Mars, because you can't transport, for example, houses, or you can't transport stuff, they're taking the raw materials with them to Mars. I mean, they plan to build houses over there, right? For example. So like even manufacturing is becoming to some extent with hardware a little bit easier. There's humanoids that are going to, just like, and everything demonetizes at some point of time, right? But anyway, so sort of coming back to this, otherwise we'd keep going on and on about exponential technologies. But Yasser, with your thought, I think, absolutely. It's not just about the idea. I think so. First, nothing can stop an idea whose time has come, right? So once the time is right for that idea, I think it can just keep going on and on and on, right? But having said that, I think also life rewards action, not intelligence, right? So you need the intelligence to come up with ideas, but you will not get a reward for your idea, right? You need to action it, you need to execute. I think this is almost now conventional wisdom, right? It wasn't always, but execution is key. And I think one key aspect, we were looking, me and a couple of partners, one of my companies supporting startups with finding investment and so on, and we were looking at a company which looks just absolutely fantastic, right? And we just couldn't, I mean, the idea is great, the business model is great, the action that they're taking is great, everything seems good, but somehow at the back of our minds, all three of us, there's three partners in that firm, we're looking at it and something's not right. Yeah, something's not clicking. And I think we came to the conclusion they haven't built an ecosystem around themselves, right? Because the ecosystem that is in their industry just isn't ready for that idea, right? So, and especially it's very, very difficult, when you set up something that is more conventional, more traditional, right? Even if it's in a red ocean, right? It's still easier to grow as a company. You'll grow slowly, but it's still easier to grow even if you're in a red ocean, because people already have the need for that service, right? You set up a law firm, you set up an accounting firm, you set up even a car manufacturer, right? People, the need is already established.
Yes.
So it's much easier. But you set up something which is in a completely blue ocean, right? You think it's easy, but it's not. It's very difficult to create a need, and you won't be able to create that need unless you have a community of followers around you, an ecosystem around you, right? A great example is this company building humanoids, right? So I was watching a talk from their CEO, the founder, and he said something to the effect that there is no ecosystem for humanoids. There is no ecosystem that exists of suppliers. Nobody is making parts for building a humanoid. Nobody's building humanoid, so nobody's building a part. So you had to create an entire ecosystem. Well, he decided to, well, he had the funding, etc. So he decided to create an ecosystem within his company itself to create those parts, all the parts that are needed in a humanoid, as an example. I don't think any companies that are innovative and futuristic will be able to easily find ecosystems for themselves. They'll have to create it.
What I was saying is, a good example of building like that kind of technology that needs time for ecosystem to be built around it is Neuralink. And that example is a good example because that goes into these kind of longevity and how basically we would have these kind of augmented brains and augmented AI within our brains to a certain level. So how do you look at it? For example, maybe a good topic also to get your opinion on it, Varun, on Neuralink and the ability for us to augment our brains and such. How do you think for that as an ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, I think again we need to create an ecosystem for that, because very soon we're going to have people with enhanced abilities, enhanced thinking abilities as well, enhanced abilities to see much farther, maybe even smell. I don't know. I haven't heard of anyone working on smell, but I know that people are working on vision and voice and of course the brain thinking capacity. So for sure, there are at some point going to be superhumans as we define them today, and it will be a long time before all of us are superhumans, right? So we will have to, the superhumans, in a way, the enhanced individuals will definitely have to create an ecosystem around themselves, because otherwise, it's not going to be a very pleasant experience when you've spent millions of dollars enhancing your brain and everyone else around you hates you and doesn't want to be part of your life any longer because you're so much better than them. So I think they'll have to share some of superhuman. Yeah.
I would expect that you use that super intelligence to cope with that. So
To make them love
to
you
be very
some
much
way.
beloved, a perfect manipulator, right?
Yeah. Yeah, perhaps. But having said that, I don't think we're very far from a future where different people uh, say that we're going to reach the singularity at different points, where man and machine will be one. I know Ray Kurzweil and I don't want to put words in somebody's mouth or misquote someone, but if I'm not wrong, the year is 2029 or 2030. I know many other people who are saying 2045. I know people who say 2060. I think most futurists think that will happen in their lifetime. So someone who's 80 thinks it'll happen in the next 5 years. Someone who's 60 thinks it'll happen in the next 20 years or 15 years. And some people who are now 40 think it'll happen in the next 50 years or 40 years, right? So there's always that biased thinking that this is going to happen in your lifetime. It's very difficult to say when, man and machine will truly be one. But one thing we can say for certain, right? I think we're not very far off from enhanced humans, right? To some extent, we're already, right? Contact lenses are a great example. There's also now the augmented reality glasses. That's a great example of how we're sort of enhancing, our capabilities.
And
Yeah.
speaking of ecosystem, maybe then to take it like on a higher picture, like you are a big you pushing towards and putting a lot of momentum in UAE, right? You see, and I would assume, and I see already how your vision, you see the future, and we see it also from our side, how a lot of changes and how fast also and rapid those changes and improvements and innovations are happening there. What do you think, like geographically wise, is going to be the future in terms of these kind of innovations and ecosystems, and how they would happen in UAE as opposed, for example, to the US, which is the most dominant right now? Do you think it's gonna change going forward, or if so, how?
I mean, without commenting on individual countries or individual regions, right? I think what's going to happen in the near future is innovation will not come in one country or one region much sooner than other regions, right? So the difference between when country one, country two, or region one, region two gets, some of these technologies, and the time when region three, region four, and region, or let's say country 200 gets it, I think that time, and I hope that time becomes narrower and narrower, rather than country A getting in the 1960s, whereas uh, country number 180 or 190 don't even have basic facilities, right? I really hope that world is a bit different in the next few years, and that we have a more equitable future. So without commenting on individual countries or regions, but I really think the time gap is going to be narrower. So even the advantage that the more advanced countries had is going to be more short lived going forward.
And then you can see that honestly already. I think with due to digitalization, I think the playing field is now global. It's not like regional. Could be we still need to see how regulations either like keep it as it is or bring it back to a little bit more fractured. But I see this future, and I think also it's showing that founders now are almost not so much at so different starting points from each other. So there is potential everywhere you go. But for founders in the UAE, and sorry if you want to say maybe you want to say something.
No, I think you can also say this about, for example, when you speak to so many people in the world nowadays, right? If you would speak to them, the late 90s, right? See, you'd speak to someone from a different country and you'll know in a minute which country they're from. I don't think that's the case any longer because our accents are merging even. So, I mean, sometimes you meet a person and you have no clue which country they're from because their accent has become so international, right? We're globalizing at every generation we're globalizing much faster. So I agree with you 100%. I think this, yeah, but let's hope that there's a more equitable world in the near future, right? Yeah.
If I may, I would still want to ask regarding what you said before, saying that there will not be a big difference between the regions. Your point is good and clear comparing to like this, right? The gap in terms of years was 10, 20 years, kind of everybody catching up, right? And now we see basically more or less an exponential growth. So it goes down to 5 years difference, whatever. But if this is a constant, right, then the speed is also faster. So the 5 years of today are as worse as 20 years, like 1990, 2900, I see. And so this for me, it levels it out. So then what I do see is, for example, you see the possibilities and freedom, like China, right? They just have other setup. It's one strategy to achieve that. On one hand, it's a kind of freedom to do everything. So everything is allowed, but still under control. So it has basically one strategy. You have USA, right? They just put money like nothing into it and let it basically grows and just remove any kind of regulations. And Europe has regulations. So there are different, I wouldn't name it always a strategy, but there definitely limits. So I would expect that they will not basically achieve basically the same level of advancement. So there will be one of all these players being the first one and have a leap of, and as I said, it no matter if it's 2 years then or 5 years, it's
Yes.
Makes a lot of
and
sense.
by that the question is, where do we see UAE? Because they try to position them right now. They're doing a lot for that. Things are happening.
Yeah, I think the UE is at the forefront of this development. I think there's a lot of development happening now. This in this country, not just by the way in commercial innovation, because see that's the difference between several countries, right? So many countries have great scientific innovation and also commercial innovation, whereas many countries have just had commercial innovation, right? Just copy paste models of what's happening in other countries, right? I think the UAE is doing really well in terms of also scientific innovation now, which I think places us at the forefront of the future development, right? I know that, there are problems that the UAE is working on that even some of the most advanced countries are not currently working on. There's research centers here for so many of the advanced technologies, quantum computing, advanced materials, biotech, so many. I'm pretty sure there are many, many other countries in the world with of the size and the capabilities of the UAE that do not have that kind of scientific innovation yet, which sort of places are at the forefront of this development.
And for you, as you are also in the startup ecosystem, because when it comes to technology specifically, a big driver for a region to become one of the leaders is those startup ecosystem flourishing and being one of the first to dominate globally. My own perspective, and you can tell me because definitely you have way more richer experience and a perspective than mine. But I would say that most of the startups that I would see in the ecosystem in the region are more novel, consumer based ideas, not like fundamental transformational businesses and technology innovations that really would make an impact and drive the level of unicorns or even greater that UI would want.
Yeah, yeah. I would agree with you. I mean, there's a lot more commercial innovation than there is scientific innovation, and that's true for most countries except maybe some countries in Europe and then maybe the US, China. I think to some extent India, but there is a lot more commercial innovation. But I really think that there is scientific innovation starting in this region. I think there are organizations in robotics, deep tech, um, you know blockchain, and I think there are, of course, the startup ecosystem can always use improvement, and I don't think it's Silicon Valley definitely yet, but I don't think it's so far off. I mean, they certainly, I think there's the talent here. I think it just needs the right nurturing and the right platform to grow, and I think we're not very far off from that. It was very different about 10 years back when I started. I think I can see a lot more advanced startups coming up in the scientific innovation as well in the region.
And for those, and I think this also maybe come bring us to a good conclusion with all of this. So almost like tracing a path for innovators and founders who are looking and already maybe on this path or looking to get into it. But how would that look like in terms of setting up, basically growing up, scaling, fundraising in UAE? So what kind of things they can master or expect in order to really win?
Perfect. So, I think this concept, if I'm not wrong, okay, I'm just going to give my perspective. I don't think it really matters any longer where in the world you're starting up now. I think the world is so global. You can get talent from anywhere in the world to move to the region. So I think as long as you have a good idea, you have a bias for action, you have the courage to experiment, I don't think it matters which country you set up in any longer. I think you just need the right advice, you need the right funding, of course, very important. And I see startups based in the region raising funds globally as well, not just from the region. And I think that's the right approach as well. I think every startup that starts, even if it's solving a regional problem, should have global ambitions and a global plan, and they should focus on building a global movement out of their product. And I think any startup or small business or entrepreneur that starts with who thinks small and just doesn't think globally and doesn't think moonshot, I don't know if there's a chance of them making an impact in today's world, right? Yeah, they might set up a commercially viable venture which would last them 5 years, 8 years, get them a good exit. But I think we need more people and more entrepreneurs who are thinking decades, not quarters.
Yeah. And I think we had coming up to the also discussion we had with Adrian, I think that it comes back to that point of certain founders would think, okay, I have this kind of business idea and this kind of market. And if I would just to take 1% of this market, this would be my result. And this is like a bad analogy, like, because thinking and aiming for 1%, it means you basically, you don't even have a chance to get that, because it looks like it's easy to get 1% rather than dominate the market. But it doesn't work, especially in markets that are global, where it's almost sometimes winner takes all markets. And I think we had this conversation, if you remember, Adrian.
Yes, yes.
And of course, depends on which industry you're in. But I agree. I mean, you need to start thinking big. Sorry, I didn't mean you need to start thinking. I mean, whoever sets up a company needs to start with big plans, big
Yes.
dreams, make a big start. Start small, think big, or think big, start small.
Where's a line of stay realistic? I mean, it's easy to think
Don't be
big. That's
realistic.
no problem. Don't be realistic.
Yeah, don't be realistic. Why do you need to be realistic, right? The world isn't made by realistic people. It's made by crazy individuals, right? Uh, who think far ahead of others and who think much bigger than others, and they're the ones who change the world, right? It's not. And of course, there is a place for everyone in this world, please don't get me wrong, right? But I don't think everybody needs to think realistic, right? I think if everybody thinks realistic, it'll be a very sorry world that we live in. We wouldn't
Yeah,
have SpaceX, we wouldn't have human flight, we wouldn't have so many of the things that we take for granted today wouldn't have happened if people thought realistically,
or
right?
it feels basically like all moths fly to the light. Well, most of them will burn. Only 1% are surviving. I do have a hard time to recommend this to everybody. Go and fly to the fire. Maybe you're the one who's not gonna burn. I think it's
No, so what if you burn? So what if you burn?
yeah, it's over. You have no problem after that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There is no regret, exactly. There is no
Yeah,
regret.
no regret.
Yeah, that's and actually in some ways, as Varun mentioned, being delusional, because a lot of people aim for the light without being while still being realistic. And in that sense, the person who aim like the maximum highest and still is delusional have an advantage over them, because he still would go for something when at the time where they would stop, where they would reach the limit of basically trying to go while still being realistic, because it has a limit, you know? So in a way, being delusional is actually the less delusional way to reach a big impact.
That resonates with me a lot, Yasser, right? I mean, go ahead, go get burnt, right? I think that it's better to be the ship that sails than be the one that lies on shore.
Yeah, doing nothing is definitely the worst thing you can do. That's
But
for sure.
also
But
just
don't forget to steer. That's a point, kind of, right? I do have, so obviously I'm the minority, so let me challenge the round here, right? Because I do basically have these two modes. First, where I start with some idea or whatever, remove all boundaries. Just think there's no tomorrow. Yeah, open up. And then when I expand it as far as I could imagine, then I step back and say, okay, now be as negative as you can. What can go wrong? But the only thing that you should not is to lose yourself in that. So this is what you do. If you combine those, then you basically have a steering wheel in your hand. So it's, I mean, ignoring, that's the point. What I mean with realistic, ignoring realities is also not a solution, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's from an ecosystem point of view. I would agree with you, Varun. pretty sure it's not what you meant, but still. But let everybody run and burn, because for the whole purpose, it will serve the best, because the more are risking, the higher chance that we get to the best solution fast. Yeah, and it doesn't matter who actually finds it, right? Important that it is found. So I do, and the principle is clear. But from a personal perspective, if I would basically said like, Adrian, don't ask questions, just run, right? Just I see the fire. I mean, is there a smarter way to get there, right? And I have my hat, so I can think. So why shouldn't I use that? And of course, this makes you slower. And I do basically see how there are stories out there, a lot of stories out there, right, where people succeed with a fraction of the capabilities of others, right, who have high capabilities but just didn't run. They were just thinking, right? And I'm still trying to see, okay, isn't there, especially when you look on a long time period, right? Slow is the fast. So sometimes being slower, stepping slower is the faster way. So you see that the things are contradicting. That's why I'm basically kind of challenging the absolute vision of ignore everything, just think bold, be bold, and then you'll get somewhere. Well, the somewhere can be on both ends.
Yeah, no, and if I may add, maybe I think also one last thing that we often forgot to mention is and it's a sign, because a lot of people, as you said, flock into the light almost like flies and such. It starts with actually knowing yourself. When you know yourself, you know exactly what kind of life you want to have, and that means living a life and dying towards a light, like, or not reaching light or being killed by light, is basically fulfilling exactly what you wanted to live towards. Actually, the worst is actually living a life of striving towards it when actually it's not your even main intention. It's just like something that you would think would allow you to feel something. A lot of people would like looking to feel love or be appreciated and valued, and they would think like doing that, okay, I need to build like $1 billion company, and then when they don't reach that, they feel now double regret because they wasted time and effort and they didn't reach it. They still didn't have love and appreciation when it was just the wrong journey. Because if it's what you want to do, ultimately, your experience would be of someone doing it, regardless if you fail or not. So it doesn't matter at the end.
Yeah, yeah. But if everyone just goes down the same path, and if ships are always going to stay in the shallow and not go into the deep end, where will we do any discoveries, right? And
Yes.
a lot of people have to risk their businesses in order to come up with a business that makes sense, right? And the thing is, that's not the end of the journey. Even if you go too fast, right, and you burn yourselves, you can
Exactly.
just pick up from there and start the next thing, right? I think.
I think I would assume that the three of us here do have this experience. I think, but I also do see people who don't have that. Just talking now about me, there is a state of mind where I don't have an idea. I'm burning. It's like it's passion, right? And this is one thing I learned basically. If you feel passion, if you see that an idea is burning, and you cannot rationalize it. Yeah, you actually can find a lot of things why it can't work, but still it's burning in you. So I learned ignore everything, burn. And I think the only thing that will at some point you will sleep or will have to eat, right? But burn. And I think I do see a lot of people who really are, like you said, everybody has ideas. I do experience people who are really a blank. They don't have inspiration. Not everybody are inspired. This is something I don't know how it happens, but not everybody has. If you have inspiration, burn.
Yeah. So people have ideas, you just they're tucked within layers and layers of
Yeah, sure.
covers, right? So you just need to unpeel the covers and you get, not
You're right. You're right.
not everyone has the ideas in their surface boiling from their brain, right? There's a lot of people who have ideas, sort of, you need to peel layers and layers. But yeah.
What I would like to, because in nowadays especially, there's so much noise out there. Yeah, everybody's telling this is a success story. You basically this FOMO is stepping out of that. Yeah, seeing me from the engineering part. Yeah, I'm seeing results there where they depict you a story as if they did it in one weekend. And I look at that, oh man, I must be very bad because it takes me a month and I will not get there, right? So and I see especially a newer generation, it's getting harder and harder to basically see the difference between a story and a real role model where that can be actually that is achievable basically. So I think this is what I'm a bit worried, right? People thinking that they are burning, thinking that they are inspired, and then you look what they are just replicating something that they have seen. So it is important that, as Yasser said, that you have the chance to learn yourself and authenticity to really know, okay, this is really me. It's not the idea of someone else, because you can easily chase ideas of someone else and then hit the wall because it's not you.
Yes.
True.
And I think that's a good conclusion. I think honestly, especially during the latter part of the session, we had some a good introspection in terms of both internally what's the driving factors in terms of these decisions, these founders building ecosystem and stuff. But it was a nice and lovely conversation. Both thank you, Adrian, for being here. Thank you, Varun, for being here. A last word maybe from you, Varun. Anything you would advise maybe the viewers to follow through? Maybe some content, some maybe platform or some way they can connect with you, or some way like they could be interesting for them to follow up with you or something?
Yeah, I think I try and post a lot of content on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn would be a great place to connect with me, hear some of these thoughts, ideas on how to build an ecosystem. I think if they'd like, they can follow my newsletter. The future is longer, and I'll send you the links, Yasser, so you can send it
Perfect.
to your listeners. Yeah, I really just want to appreciate what you're doing, Yasser and Adrian, and loved being a part of this conversation and great fun. So thanks so much for listening to my ideas.
Thank you, Varun. Thank you, Varun, for being here. Thank you, Adrian. And thank you for the viewers for watching. Yeah, that was another episode of Leap Maker, and we'll be seeing each other in the next one. Thank you.